There's a ridiculous amount of Nintendo franchises, and you probably don't even know some of these exist, so let's rank every Nintendo IP with at least 2 entries from worst to best, starting at number 79 with the R.O.B games. R.O.B, who you probably know from Smash, actually had his own line of games. After the video game crash of 1983, toy stores refused to stock anything that called itself a game console, so Nintendo rebranded the NES and sold it with R.O.B and got shelf space they couldn't have gotten otherwise, and only 2 games ended up using R.O.B. There was Gyromite, which was a 2-player puzzle platformer where you move platforms by pressing buttons on a second controller, or theoretically by having R.O.B do it, which took about twice as long and was less reliable. Then there was Stack It, which, shocker, was a stacking game. Neither of them are that interesting with or without the robot, and there's not really any reason to play these 2 games, but it's a fun novelty, I guess. Number 78, Game & Watch. The Game & Watch gallery games on Game Boy Color deserve a mention first because they're the best thing this franchise produced, but that still isn't much. It was 4 collections of remade titles of original Game & Watch games. As for the original hardware, this is where the D-pad came from. The clamshell design that became the DS and Game Boy Advance SP started here as well. The dual screen concept also originated here. Historically, it is very important, but these games are extremely simple. It doesn't really have traditional animations or anything. The dual screen concept that defined 2 generations of Nintendo handhelds also started here, and these games would work by using pre-printed LCD screens, and historically they are very interesting, but they're not fun to play for more than like 2 minutes. Number 77, Color TV Game. These were a line of dedicated home consoles released in Japan between 1977 and 1980. Each was built around a small selection of games permanently included in the hardware. Most were variations on Pong or other sports. One of them even had a steering wheel. They sold around 3 million units total across the line, which gave Nintendo more experience that led to the Famicom. Now this is not something you're probably going to sit down and play in 2026, but just like with the Game & Watch, it's very important historically and it's a cool novelty. Before I continue, I do want to explain more about how this ranking is going to work. My personal opinion on these games is the biggest factor, but I'm also weighing things like critical reception, cultural impact, relevancy, and consistency. A franchise with 3 games can rank above one with 20 if those 3 games are great and the franchise is actually important now. To keep this manageable, I'm only including franchises with at least 2 distinct games, at least 1 North American release, except for the Color TV game since I just wanted to talk about that. Sub-series also will only get their own spot if they have 8 or more games, which is why something like Mario Kart or WarioWare are separate entries, but something like Pokemon Stadium will just be grouped in with Pokemon. Series Nintendo published but doesn't own it all aren't here as well, like Bayonetta or Hamtaro. My criteria isn't perfect, and a lot of it will just come down to my own opinions, but I want to make this a little more interesting because even if I don't like a series like Pokemon, it would be a little ridiculous to rank it low when I'm trying to rank every Nintendo series. The number 76, Master of Illusion. This is one of those weird DS-era Nintendo experiments that somehow work. The games taught real card tricks, coin tricks, and sleight of hand technique while using the DS touchscreen and dual screens to help sell the illusion. It wasn't really so much a game as much of an interactive magic lesson, but I guess if you're into magic or anything like that, it could be a fun little game to play. It actually had a sequel called Master of Illusion Express, and it was a series of smaller DSiWare releases rather than one single follow-up. I don't think anyone would consider this a system seller, but for what it's trying to do, I guess it serves its purpose, but not really anything more than that. Number 75, Art Academy. Drawing and painting tutorials for the DS, 3DS, and Wii U using the stylus. The Pokemon Art Academy made the most sense as a product. Learning to draw by practicing Pokemon characters is a pretty fun way to learn to draw, and the 3DS touchscreen was a better tool for this than you'd expect. I just have this so low kind of like for the same reason as Master of Illusions, because it's not really a game. It also never sold crazy well. It didn't have much of an impact. There's not really much reason to play it now when tablets are commonplace. I actually did play the one on Wii U though, and it's perfectly fine, but it's more of a tool than a game, so I don't really know how to rank it much higher. Number 74, Steel Diver. Nintendo looked at the launch of the 3DS and apparently decided what people really wanted was a submarine simulator. Steel Diver has you piloting submarines through side-scrolling missions while managing speed, depth, tornadoes, and enemy vessels. It's a very slow, deliberate game, and it's kind of a strange thing to launch with because people just bought new hardware and want to be impressed. Reviews weren't great. It actually did get a free-to-play follow-up called Steel Diver Subwars a few years later that switched to a first-person perspective and built around online multiplayer. I'll give Nintendo credit for trying something different, but it just didn't really work that well. Number 73, Bit Generations. One of the strangest things Nintendo's ever published. Instead of making one game, Nintendo released 7 minimalist experimental games on the GBA under the Bit Generations label. Titles like Dot Stream, where you race a line of pixels through abstract courses, Orbo, where you slingshot a satellite around planets using only gravity, and Sound Voyager, which is played almost entirely by sound rather than visuals. Each one was basically one idea and nothing else, stripped down as far as it could go. Several were later reworked and re-released under the Art Style label on WiiWare and DSiWare. Most people have not heard of these games, and honestly it's understandable, but they're pretty fascinating, and it's definitely weird and creative. Number 72, Endless Ocean. 3 games where you scuba dive and look at fish. No combat, no fail states, no real objectives. You're watching marine life, finding treasures, slowly mapping an ocean, an endless ocean if you will. I'll see myself out. There actually was a fairly recent game on Switch, but these games are just so bare bones that unless you're just a huge aquatic life enthusiast, there's really not much here. The Switch game also launched at $50, which is highway robbery for what you're getting here, so I can only imagine the sales were next to nothing. Like, if you want to see aquatic life and have $50, you might as well just go to the aquarium or something. Number 71, Battle Clash. If you owned a Super Scope, Nintendo's giant bazooka accessory for the SNES, chances are this is a game you remember. Battle Clash and its sequel Metal Combat Falcon's Revenge are on-rails mech shooters where you face a series of giant robots one at a time, shooting at their weak points while blasting incoming projectiles out of the air before they hit you. Each mech has different weapons and movement patterns, like some will circle you, some will charge at you. Metal Combat built on the first game with battery backup and more mechanics, and it's probably the better of the two. The whole thing is just very 90s. The Super Scope itself didn't exactly become a huge success, which means these games got left behind with the accessory they were built around. Another example of a neat idea, but just so few people played this, and it was only 2 games. Number 70, Play Action Football. Nintendo made football games before licensed sports games came to dominate the genre. The original NES game was a fairly straightforward take on American football, while the Super Nintendo follow-up added more teams, more modes, and a lot more depth. Neither game had much lasting impact, and both were quickly overshadowed by series like Madden, but they represent a brief period where Nintendo was willing to make sports games themselves instead of simply licensing characters out to other developers. I could probably have this a little lower, but I like football. And number 69, F1 Race. One of Nintendo's oldest racing franchises, the original F1 Race came out on Famicom cartridge in 1984, the same year as Excitebike, and got a sequel on the Famicom disk system in 1987 called Famicom Grand Prix F1 Race, which is also where Mario showed up on the cover for reasons that I don't even know. The Game Boy version came in 1990, and this is one most people actually would have played. None of these are especially deep, but they're an interesting reminder of how early Nintendo was experimenting with racing games, years before Mario Kart and F-Zero made it one of their strongest genres. Number Gert, Nintendo Labo. I remember when Nintendo Labo was announced and I was just very confused as to what it was and why exactly it was happening. So basically, you buy a kit, you punch out sheets of cardboard, you fold them into something Nintendo calls a Toy-Con, whether it's a piano, a fishing rod, a motorbike, a bazooka, which is the one I have. Then you slot the Joy-Cons inside and the sensors and HD rumble turn the cardboard into a functional controller. The technology underneath is actually pretty clever, but the problem is that building things takes longer than you're actually going to play this. Like, you might spend over an hour building this and literally play the game for like 5 minutes. I got the VR kit when it came out, built the bazooka, played it literally one time, and I think the bazooka is still in a box somewhere. Like, I'll try and find it for this video, but that just goes to show how little I actually played this. There were 4 kits that released, and the Toy-Con Garage mode let you program your own interactions, which I guess was pretty creative, but Nintendo quickly forgot about these. Number Wrecking Crew. So in this game, for some reason, Mario is not a plumber and he's just working construction. The NES original is a puzzle action game where you clear structures by smashing ladders, walls, and platforms while avoiding enemies and your rival Spike. It's a fun little game if you like to destroy things. Then Nintendo made Wrecking Crew 98, which was a Japan exclusive sequel that turned the concept into a competitive puzzle game where players send debris and obstacles back and forth across the screen. These games actually still have a fan base today, and they're fun little games, but there was only a couple of them, there hasn't been one in a very long time, and they are very simple.
Execute Order 66.
Balloon Fight. One of Nintendo's earliest arcade-style classics. You attach balloons to your character, you flap around the screen, and you try to pop enemy balloons before they pop yours. It was directly inspired by Joust, which was the 1982 Williams Electronics arcade game. What makes it interesting beyond the gameplay is who made it. Yoshio Sakamoto designed it, the legendary Gunpei Yokoi produced it, and Satoru Iwata programmed the NES port, which just makes this game feel a lot more important because it has such big names. There's also a balloon trip mode, a side-scrolling endless obstacle run. It's arguably more fun than the main game, if I'm being honest. Nintendo followed up with Balloon Kid on the Game Boy, which expanded the concept into a proper platformer. For 1984 though, it holds up pretty well. Number 65, Jam with the Band. 2 DS rhythm games where you cover different instrument parts along with real songs using the touchscreen and microphone. Both got good reviews in the regions that had them, Japan and Europe, and neither came to North America officially. Like, if you know this series, you've probably just watched too many videos on obscure Nintendo games. Also, quick note, I didn't even realize this didn't release in North America, but I'll keep it on the list anyway. Number 64, Electroplankton. 10 species of interactive plankton on a DS screen. Some record sound and bounce it back, some arrange it into patterns based on microphone input, some generate music as you draw paths with the stylus. It's not really like a way to win or lose in this, it's just a very weird game. It was made by a Japanese media artist, and it's an art installation that Nintendo agreed to publish as a DS game in 2005. There's nothing else quite like it in Nintendo's catalog, and while the game is pretty light and simple, it still actually gets a lot of love by its niche community. There was only ever one full release, but it does qualify since it had a ton of DSi shop releases. Also, fun fact, I can almost guarantee you've seen something from this game if you played Smash. You know that weird leaf stage? That's actually from Electroplankton, which I didn't know until recently. And speaking of little sound machines, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Man Asleep. Making a video like this sounds fun until you realize ranking every Nintendo franchise means late nights researching, writing, recording, and editing a small novel about R.O.B, Electroplankton, and whatever else Nintendo decided to publish for some reason. So yeah, sleep has been very important lately, and Man Asleep has really helped me with that. They sent over their Cool Sleep Mask, Pro Sleep Mask, and White Noise Machine, and I've been wearing one of the masks and using the rain sounds on the White Noise Machine every day. Both masks are extremely comfortable, lightweight, and adjustable. You can even move the eye cups around so they actually fit your face instead of just pressing awkwardly against your eyes, and they fully block out the light. And as for the White Noise Machine, you just plug it in, keep the remote by your bed, and you can change the volume or sound without getting up, making it extremely convenient. So if you're like me and you're staying up way too late, whether it's because of work, editing, school, or because you made the mistake of ranking almost 80 Nintendo franchises, I definitely recommend checking out Man Asleep. You can use the link in the description and use code DOMAINY for 10% off at checkout. Thank you to Man Asleep for sponsoring this video. Now let's move from relaxing sleep products to something I know absolutely nothing about: fashion. Number 63. Style Savvy. 4 fashion boutique simulator games across DS and 3DS. Well made for what they are. The dedicated fan base that's been asking for a Switch entry for years says something about how much these people love this series. As you could probably imagine, I've never played this series. Not exactly something that appeals to me, but to be fair to it, if you are looking for a style simulation game, these games are pretty in-depth and it certainly seems to be unique. You could definitely see this being a lot higher for some people. Like, I'm sure some of you watching do really love it. It also hasn't been dormant for a ridiculously long time. Like, it's been 9 years now, so maybe we'll see a Switch or Switch 2 version someday. Number 62, Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball. So this was a licensed sports series Nintendo actually developed themselves, which is pretty unusual, but also again, they did make a football series. The SNES original had the MLB license, but not the MLB Players Association's license, which meant real teams and real stadiums, but no real player names except Griffey himself. Everyone else was just a fictional character with that player's stats. Now, this was an SNES baseball game, so you can't expect that much from it, but it was better than pretty much anything else at the time. The series only ran 4 games total, 2 on the SNES and 2 on Nintendo 64, but I'd say the SNES original is why this is so high. Like this was a pretty popular game, but there's not really any reason to go back to it now outside of nostalgia. I'll give it credit though, baseball's my favorite sport. Number 61, Magical Vacation. So this was an RPG series from Brownie Brown, the studio founded by several former Square developers after working on Legend of Mana. The series begins at a magical academy before expanding into much larger adventures involving elemental magic and parallel worlds. Magic Vacation stayed in Japan on the GBA, while its sequel, Magic Star Sign, came to North America on the DS. The elemental magic systems gives combat a bit more depth here than it first appears to have, and the art style has a lot of personality. People who do love it tend to point to the writing and the world building, which was pretty good for a handheld RPG at the time. Neither game sold well enough to keep the series going, but it is a shame because Star Sign especially had more going for it than most DS RPGs of that era. Number 60, Fluidity. This is actually one of Nintendo's most creative puzzle games. Instead of controlling a character, you control a pool of water by tilting the environment around. As the game progresses, you gain the ability to transform into ice and steam, which opens up new ways to navigate levels and solve puzzles. The physics here pretty much make up the whole game. Like moving around here is very satisfying. It started as a WiiWare title before getting a smaller 3DS follow-up called Fluidity Spin Cycle. The WiiWare storefront was a graveyard for good ideas, but there's just no discoverability, there's no physical releases, just no word of mouth. And a game where the whole point is tilting the controller is always going to be hard to convey to someone scrolling past it. I actually would have really liked this franchise to get more attention. 59, Kururin. You pilot a slowly rotating stick through increasingly tight corridors without letting it touch the walls. 3 games across GBA and GameCube, all released in Japan and Europe, qualifying here through later virtual console availability since North America never got an original release. Gonna be honest, I never played any of these games, but they actually do have a cult following and actually have some challenging gameplay that can be rewarding. But actually give one of these games a shot in SO just to see what the hype's about. Number 58, Fossil Fighters. Basically Pokemon with dinosaurs. You travel to excavation sites, you chip fossils out of rock in a minigame, revive them into creatures called Vivosaurs, and battle them turn-based. 3 games across the DS and 3DS. The excavation mechanic I think was interesting in theory, but I just didn't really love it that much. One of the games in the series, Frontier, tried open world excavation, and the reception was pretty mixed. I just don't think these games are great, in my own humble opinion. The combat never clicked with me, and I found the pacing repetitive. I know some of you probably love Fossil Fighters. I just have it so low because there's only 3 games here, but they are full games. They did have some support, and it's not all bad, so that's kind of also why it gets a little higher than maybe you would think. Number 57, Panel de Pon / Puzzle League. This franchise's entire history in the West is Nintendo repeatedly deciding the actual game wasn't worth selling on its own. And not gonna lie, I didn't even remember this until I started writing this video. The original SNES release featuring a fairy tale world with a character named Lip got rebranded as Tetris Attack with a Yoshi skin when it came west. The sequel became Pokemon Puzzle League, then Dr. Mario and Puzzle League as a bundle, then Puzzle League Express and DSiWare. Never the same name twice, and the gameplay underneath all of that is actually pretty good if you're into this kind of thing. Horizontal tile swapping with chains and combos, and people have actually been competing in this game at a high level for like 30 years now. Panel de Pon came to Switch Online, and I haven't really played it, but this franchise is actually a little bigger than you probably think. Number 56, 1-2 Switch. Building a launch game around looking your opponent instead of the screen is a pretty interesting idea, and the marble counting game where you feel vibrations from the controller and guess a number was a really cool idea to show off the HD rumble. A few other activities here have the same quality of using the hardware. Pretty much all the games here kind of feel like tech demos showing off the Joy-Cons and the Switch hardware. This game gets a lot of hate, but it is a fun game, at least for me, and it had some really creative mini-games like Quick Draw, which was one of my personal favorites, or the Gladiator one. The whole issue with this is that it's a glorified tech demo that costs $50, and that just really soured it. 1-2 Switch got very lackluster reviews, and the biggest criticism was almost always that it had an absurd price. If this was a pack-in title or like a $20 release, I can almost guarantee it would have had a much more positive view. And the reason it even qualifies for this is because it got a sequel called Everybody 1-2 Switch years later that allowed for a lot more players. You really need at least 4 people, while the original just needed 2. Again, it just was not worth the price, and the only reason I even own it is because I found it for $5. Only reason it's even this high is because I do have a lot of good memories with it. It sold incredibly well, and it really is a fun little tech demo, or tech demos I should say, but not much more than that. It's probably worse than some franchises I rank lower, but again, my personal bias is a big part of this ranking. Number 55, 1080 Snowboarding. 2 Nintendo EAD games from the same team that made Wave Race, built around physics that were real for the time. The courses actually rewarded players memorizing them because the trick system had depth, like there was actually a lot of systems in this game. Then Avalanche on GameCube added weather and an avalanche mechanic that created some really fun races that were already close. Both really good games that I think are underrated, but they are still just snowboarding games at the end of the day. Number 54, Cruis'n. This was basically just very simple arcade racing. You pick a car, you hold accelerate, and then you just weave through traffic. Cruis'n USA was one of the better known racing games on Nintendo 64, and the series stuck around through Cruis'n World, Cruis'n Exotica, and later arcade entries before eventually returning with Cruis'n Blast on Switch. These games were really never trying to compete with other racing games like it. They're very fast arcade racers that are more about spectacle than any sort of realism. It's fun for a few races, it's fun with friends, but not a franchise that reached the same level as Nintendo's best racers. Number 53, Elite Beat Agents. The premise of the Japanese original is that a squad of cheerleaders responds to people in crisis by performing elaborate routines which you facilitate by tapping in circles in time with J-pop. That's just not a sentence I ever thought I'd read. The scenarios are unhinged here: a ramen chef being chased by his own food, a scientist fighting to stay awake, a kid trying to beat his grandfather at a board game. The difficulty is actually pretty demanding, and the DS touchscreen was perfect for this. Elite Beat Agents was the Western localization, suited agents instead of cheerleaders, a completely different soundtrack like Material Girl, Jumpin' Jack Flash, a cover of September by Earth, Wind & Fire, which is cool, but personally I think Boogie Wonderland is the better Earth, Wind & Fire song. The series has its fans that are reviewed pretty positively, but it's just not really my thing, and it's been dormant for nearly 20 years. Number 52, Dylan's Rolling Western. An armadillo named Dylan who rolls at high speed and defends frontier towns from rock creatures called Groks, not to be confused with Grok. 3 3DS eShop games where you set up defensive structures between waves and then get down in the field and fight alongside them. The third entry, Dead Heatbreakers, went full Mad Max and had you playing as your own me. Easily the most ambitious thing the series tried, but it came out as a late 3DS eShop exclusive in 2018, and the audience for it just wasn't there. Dylan himself is a good character design, and the Western aesthetic is one of the more original things Nintendo published in that eShop era. I actually covered this in a recent video, and the series really does mean a lot to a lot of people, but it's unlikely it's ever going to return since the company that developed it's no longer around. Number 51, Clubhouse games. So this contains chess, mahjong, backgammon, darts, card games, other board games, and things. 3 entries across the DS, a DSi digital release, and Switch. The Switch version, 51 Worldwide Classics, is honestly one of the more underrated games on the platform. High production value, controls adapted well for each game type, solid online and local multiplayer, and the variety means that almost anyone will find something they want to spend time with. There's even a piano mode, and as someone who kind of plays the piano, I had some fun with this. I was one of the few people really excited for this when it was announced, just because I loved the game on the DS. These are just very relaxing, or not relaxing depending on how intense you are at these games. And it's just a very clean, streamlined way to play classic games with friends or just random people online. One of my friends and I went through a phase where we would just play this whenever we would hang out instead of like Mario Kart or Smash Brothers. For me personally, I like this a lot better than some franchises ahead of it, but trying to mix in some objectivity. These are pretty much just 2 full games in like 20 years, and it's nothing original you can't get elsewhere. I mean, you can play all these for free on your phone or just take out the physical board game, but it is convenient and the presentation is nice. Number 50, Wave Race. The whole thing about this game, or series I should say, is that the water behaves like water, and you have to work with it rather than against it. Like, the whole point of the game is kind of that you just have to react to the wave, and you don't just hold accelerate, like there's deeper systems in place. And then Blue Storm on GameCube refined it further. But the franchise is basically those 2 games and a Game Boy original that barely even feels like the same series. These games are actually really fun if you've ever played them, so it's kind of sad that we haven't gotten a game in so long. Number 49, Another Code / Trace Memory. So 2 Sing games remade together for Switch in 2024 as Another Code Recollection. Trace Memory is a short atmospheric mystery about a teenage girl searching for her father on a strange island. And the DS original, the hardware actually had to be used really well throughout, and at one point you physically close the DS clamshell to scan something between the screens, which isn't something that actually matters that much, but it's just a cool feature. Another Code R expanded the story on Wii and never came to North America because Sing went bankrupt in 2010. So eventually Nintendo rebuilt both the games from the ground up for Switch in 2024. Both games are definitely worth your time if you're into this genre. I always think it's really cool when Nintendo brings back a niche series like this, because it just gives these games another chance, because I highly doubt a lot of people remember this from the DS, and even if someone hears about it, they're less likely to go back to the DS or find the physical cartridge for the DS to play this, so having it on the Switch makes it far more accessible. Number 48, Pilotwings. 3 games across 3 Nintendo hardware launches, the SNES, the N64, and the 3DS. Each one basically just demonstrates what the new platform can do with open space and flight. The SNES original showed off Mode 7 graphics, Pilotwings 64 was an early showcase for what 3D open space could feel like, and Pilotwings Resort on 3DS used the stereoscopic 3D depth effect and was built on the Wii Sports Resort Island, which meant it kind of felt like an extension of Wii Sports. These games are all fine, and Pilotwings Resort is definitely my favorite. None of these games have a lasting impact, and it's been dormant for like 15 years now, but I don't know, I just have a soft spot for the series, especially Resort on 3DS. I always just found it fun to just explore the whole island, and I know the Switch 2 was now launched over a year ago, so we're probably not getting another Pilotwings game, but it would be really cool to see this on Switch 2 taking advantage of that hardware. Number 47, Hotel Dusk. In this game, you follow Kyle Hyde, who's a former NYPD detective who shot his own partner, who turned out to be working for a criminal syndicate, and now he works as a salesman who clearly does other things for his former boss on the side. You hold the DS sideways like a book, the character art is rotoscoped in black and white and looks like nothing else on the platform, and the writing here is very patient, but like it works for the mystery very well. The hotel fills up with guests over the course of the game, and each have their own stories, and by the end, the sequel Last Window came out in Japan and Europe in 2010, but never reached North America because developer Sing that I mentioned before went bankrupt before it could happen. So this is a visual novel, so it's not for everyone, but like with Another Code, if you're into these kinds of games, I think you'll really have a good time with this. Number 46, Famicom Detective Club. Yet another visual novel, and of course, as the name implies, this was on the Famicom, specifically the Famicom Disk System, and these are only released in Japan, so there was really no way for people in North America to play these. These are kind of dark mysteries, like a lot more mature than you'd expect from a Nintendo game, and the reason this qualifies is because it actually got a North American release in 2024. There was Meo the Smiling Man, which was the first original Famicom Detective Club game in 35 years. Before that, the series was 2 visual novel mystery games from 88 and 89 respectively, but in the past 5 years, we've got the fully remade Switch releases in 2021, and the new game in 2024, like I mentioned. There's full voice acting, there's English localization for the first time. Meo specifically got really strong reviews, and probably has one of the better stories in a Nintendo game. Number 45, the legendary Starfy. This series is an underwater platformer where Starfy himself is built around one movement quirk that defines literally everything. He can't really fight, so he spins, because naturally, what else would you do? You use that spin to defeat enemies and interact with the environment, but he's fragile enough that you have to be more methodical. The levels move between underwater and land sections, and the whole thing is just very light. Like, there's probably not much stress you're gonna be feeling in this. The graphics are really friendly, and also, like, the main character Starfy is a fan favorite. There's only been 5 games, and 4 of them stayed in Japan, and there was 1 Western release in 2009. And also, Wario shows up in the 3rd game for some reason. You can also play some of these on NSO. These platformers aren't anything crazy, but they feel like Nintendo games. They're fun games for what they are. Number 44, Excitebike. The NES original is a classic. It was a launch title, and you've probably played it before. There's a turbo button that speeds you up but overheats your engine if you hold it too long, so you have to manage your speed against heat while hitting ramps and just adjusting your angle. It's very simple, but there are physics here, I guess. Like, it's not like you just press one button and that's it. There's also a track editor in the original game, which was way ahead of its time. Then there was Excitebike 64 on the N64, and it was just a solid expansion of the concept. Excite Truck on Wii moved away from the motocross format into something a little more arcade, and the most recent dedicated release was Excitebike World Rally on WiiWare in 2009. The series has been quiet since, and these games are all good fun, but they're just kind of fun in short bursts. Number 43, NES Remix. So this started on the Wii U in 2013, and later got a compilation release on 3DS called Ultimate NES Remix. So this wasn't like an original game. Nintendo took NES titles and broke them into short remix challenge stages, whether it was speedrunning Donkey Kong, playing a mirrored Super Mario Bros., controlling Link inside a Mario stage. The concept was just something really fun, and this is something I had a ton of fun with when I got it on Wii U. A lot of NES games, like I mentioned, are kind of most fun in short bursts, and I feel like this game is actually my favorite way to experience some of these games that I don't want to play the entire thing of. It's also rewarding to just try and get a new high score. There's also a Switch version of this game made pretty recently, and it's very similar to the previous versions because there's only so much you can do with this concept. Personally, I would love if they made like an SNES remix and they kept making this a series, but still, I have this series a little higher than a lot of people just because I had a lot of fun with it. Number 42, Sin and Punishment. Sin and Punishment is a rail shooter, and the game moves you forward, and all you have to do is just aim, shoot, and dodge while the screen fills up with enemies and projectiles. There was even a game on Wii, and it adds a melee attack for close range enemies and a dodge that briefly slows incoming fire, so it does add a little more variety here. The scoring system also rewards staying in danger rather than playing conservatively. Grazing enemy fire without getting hit multiplies your score, so the optimal way to play is also the most reckless way to play. It's a treasure game, which means the difficulty is tuned to a level that's probably a lot higher than you'd expect. The N64 original stayed in Japan until Wii Virtual Console gave it a wider audience, and it's a fun, if unusual, rail shooter. It's only had 2 games and nothing since 2009, but I'm ranking it high just due to the quality of the games. Number 41, Brain Age / Big Brain Academy. For a few years in the mid-2000s, Brain Age was just a straight-up cultural phenomenon that had nothing to do with traditional gaming. The DS original convinced retirement homes, parents, and people who had never touched a game in their lives that just daily math exercises and memory tests would improve their cognitive function, and the science behind that is not exactly the most backed up nowadays, but anyway, it was still fun. And even though this wasn't a traditional game, these sold a ridiculous amount of copies because, like I mentioned, it was a cultural phenomenon, and it kind of just came out of nowhere. There were, of course, a few games on the DS. There was Big Brain Academy's Wii Degree multiplayer mode, which was a ton of fun. It came back on 3DS, it came back on Switch, so it still stayed fairly relevant. Nowadays, the series is not nearly as big as it was at its peak, but there's still people playing it. There's still a game that was made a few years ago, and for some reason, I don't even think it's been released in North America since, but you can play it because the Switch isn't region locked. This one was really hard for me to rank, because on one hand, I think it's a fun game, it's sold incredibly well, and it's still relevant, but also at the same time, like, it's not really that much of a traditional game, so I kind of felt like somewhere in the middle was a good spot for this. Number 40, StarTropics. One of Nintendo's strongest forgotten franchises. The original StarTropics follows Mike Jones, who's a teenager who travels to a chain of tropical islands searching for his missing archaeologist uncle, which eventually spirals into ancient civilizations, aliens, saving the world, like just your average adventure stuff. It plays somewhere between like Zelda and an action RPG if I had to find a way to describe it, with also grid-based movement, dungeon exploration, and some surprisingly difficult combat. The most famous moment is a puzzle that required players to literally dip an included paper letter into water to reveal a hidden code. There were only 2 games before Nintendo abandoned the series, but the original still has a really loyal following, and these games are really good. Like, these are not just games you'll play for 10 minutes. Like, these are really well-made games you can play for a while, and even though it's only a couple games and hasn't had a new game in so long, that's why it's this high. Number 39, Dr. Mario. So this series actually has enough to be considered its own instead of just part of the grander Mario franchise, and you've probably all played this before. They're all very good puzzle games with a very simple core. You just drop vitamin capsules onto viruses and match colors to clear them. Nintendo's never really done anything that interesting with the series. Like, there's been a few games that have changed things up a little bit. Like, there was multiplayer, there was Dr. Luigi. It's shown up on pretty much every Nintendo platform since 1990 in some form. They even had a mobile game not too long ago. However, we actually have not gotten a Dr. Mario game on Switch, which is kind of strange. So as someone who's not huge into puzzle games like this, I like the Dr. Mario series. I think they're well-made games, but these games have always been very safe, and it's really just not my thing. But it is hard to deny that the series is incredibly popular and well-made. At number 38, we have Picross. So this is kind of like in the same category as Dr. Mario, where they are very well-made games, but they are all pretty similar. You use number clues around a grid to determine which squares should be filled in. You gradually reveal a hidden image. It sounds boring when you explain it, but then it can become a little bit addictive when you keep playing it. Nintendo has published the series for decades, with most entries developed by Jupiter. It's appeared across Game Boy, DS, 3DS, pretty much every Nintendo console. If you like logic puzzles at all, there's a good chance you'll probably get addicted to this for a little bit. None of these games are going to get like a lot of fanfare when they release, but they always seem to do pretty well. And also the actual ownership of Picross, I researched a lot, but I couldn't find a definitive answer on if Nintendo actually owns it, if they're just publishing it, so I just decided to include it anyway. And number 37, BoxBoy. I actually covered this in another video if you want to check it out, but this was a series of games on 3DS and one on Switch, developed by HAL Laboratory, who you know from Kirby and Smash and other games. You play as Kirby, who generates a chain of connected boxes from his body. You can make them into a platform to stand on, a hook to grab a ledge, a shield to block lasers, or a bridge to span a gap. Early stages teach you the basics, but later stages put you in rooms where you have to figure out a sequence of configurations in the right order, and it's a really well-made puzzle game. Then there was the sequel, BoxBoy, which added another box to the name and gave Kirby the ability to generate 2 chains simultaneously. There was one more on 3DS, which in fact actually had physical release with the most expensive amiibo nowadays. Like, seriously, how much does this cost? It's said that the series is pretty much lost. Like, unless you have a 3DS that already has it, there's no way to play any of these games officially, except for the one on Switch, which just makes me wonder why we haven't gotten some sort of collection. Because while these games aren't anything too crazy, they're genuinely really well-made fun games and do deserve more attention. Number 36, Chibi-Robo. The GameCube original is a very strange game that very much feels like a GameCube game. You play as a small robot trying to make a dysfunctional family happy, with a husband who won't come out of his frog costume, a daughter who believes her toys come alive at night, and a wife who feels ignored and exhausted. It's actually a very emotional game, and it's kind of out of place how emotional it is. And then almost every subsequent entry tried to make Chibi-Robo into something more marketable, but just lost the quality that made the original worth playing. The one that's most famous, unfortunately now, is Ziplash on the 3DS, which just turned him into a standard platformer, and which came bundled with an amiibo and a package that just did not really sell. And I actually got this on launch day for whatever reason, but I guess I got this amiibo with it that's pretty cool. The original is actually on Switch 2 online now, so people can find out what made this game so good. There were a couple other games in the series on the DS, 3DS mostly were Japanese exclusive, and this series could be lower, but I just really love Chibi-Robo. Number 35, Mario vs. Donkey Kong. There's surprisingly a lot of games in the series, and that's why it qualifies. It started with the Game Boy Advance original, which as a kid was one of my favorite games. Like, I was addicted to this game, I just bring it everywhere. Then we got a bunch of games on the DS, which all just followed the minis, and they played very differently from the original. Now, these are fun games, but they all kind of feel the same. Like, if you've played one of them, you're not missing out on much by not playing the others. You got 3DS games, got a Wii U release, and one of them was Tipping Stars, where you would actually make your own levels and share them, and then you would have people tip you stars, hence the name. I remember when this game was announced, I was really hyped for it because I really liked the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, and I wanted to get the physical release, but they only released this game digitally, which I was just really disappointed about. I still played this game a ton though. The series kind of went on a hiatus for a little bit until we got the Mario vs. Donkey Kong remake in 2024, and it's pretty much just a straight up remake of the Game Boy Advance original, and you could play through this in like 3 hours. Like, I just got it last year, and it's a very faithful remake, but I do wish that they added a little more content. These games have never gotten too much attention, but there's been a lot of games. They're all good games, even if they don't really change much, so that's why it's going to go at number 35. Number 34, Nintendogs. So Nintendogs sold over 20 million copies across DS versions, and the reason is that calling your dog's name into the microphone and petting it with a touchscreen was just something that resonated with that many people. Like, if you had a DS, chances are you played this game. Like, if you know what Tamagotchi is, which was a craze in the 90s before my time, it makes sense why Nintendogs became so popular, because in Tamagotchi you'd have your own pet. It was very bare bones on a small screen, but this of course expanded on that a lot, and the whole thing really only works because it just brings all the DS features together. Then we even got Nintendogs and Cats on the 3DS, but the series has been dormant since then. I feel like this is the type of game that people either played for like just a month at a time or just picked up for like a week and just stopped playing, but it's hard to ignore its impact, especially as someone who grew up during the DS era. Number 33, Custom Robo. I haven't spent much time with the series personally, but building miniature robots from interchangeable parts and battling them in arenas where every configuration decision changes how you play, it was just a really fantastic idea. And if you go to like any comment section on any Nintendo wishlist article, you'll probably see someone asking for a new Custom Robo. Like, this series hasn't been around for like 20 years, but people still really want a new game. The GameCube game had a proper campaign and an arena battle system that kept people playing long after the story was done, but then Nintendo just stopped making it in the mid-2000s and never really explained why. And it gets this high on the list just because these games are really fantastic. Even though I haven't spent that much time with them, still recognize how unique these are and just how great they really are. So hopefully someday we get a new game. Number 32, Pushmo. So these were 4 games from Intelligent Systems, who also makes Fire Emblem and Paper Mario, as well as a few others. And in these games you follow Mallow and just push colored blocks to climb puzzle structures. Each entry changed what the blocks can do, or rather than just adding more of the same. Like in Pushmo, you would literally just push the blocks. In Crash Mode, you can make the blocks fall freely rather than slide. There's Pushmo World on Wii U, which was just like an expanded version of the original Pushmo. And then there was Stretch Mode, which let you stretch the blocks. I actually covered this in another video as well if you want to check that out. But these are just very cozy, low-stress puzzle games where you can't actually lose and you could just spend as much time as you want trying to solve these puzzles. Because especially later on in these games, the puzzles get brutally difficult. And like with BoxBoy, it's really sad that these games are gone now. Like, you can't play them officially unless you have them on the 3DS already. And there's actually online sharing for levels too. Like, you can make your own levels and share them. And you would think that that means that the online community for this is dead since there's no online on the 3DS anymore. But since the 3DS version had you scan QR codes, it actually still lets you play custom levels nowadays, so that's pretty cool. Number 31, Rhythm Heaven. Can't really think of a downside to any of these games. The whole series is built around just keeping rhythm pretty much. And the music, of course, works within the gameplay, which I always love in games. There's been a few games for like 20 plus years now. Fever on Wii has one of the most underrated soundtracks Nintendo's ever made. And Megamix on 3DS is probably the best retrospective collection Nintendo's put together for the franchise. The GBA original, though, has actually never left Japan, and for some reason it's not even on NSO. While we haven't gotten a new game in the series for a while, we're finally getting another one next month with Rhythm Heaven Groove on Switch, and thankfully it's going to have a physical copy, so I think I'm going to be picking this up on launch day. I also think there's a very good chance that this game will sell well since it's starting to get more attention, which I think is a really good thing because these games are easy to pick up and play and really satisfying, and I'd love for there to be more games in the future. Number 30, Kid Icarus. So you probably all know the series from Super Smash Bros. Because of Pit, and as a Pit main myself, I really appreciate this series. Also, comment if you're a Pit main. But anyway, the first game on the NES is just a platformer. You climb vertically, you shoot arrows. Like, it's a fine game, it's a difficult game, but it wasn't really memorable. And before Smash, there was not really many discussions about this. There was a Game Boy title as well, but that got even less attention. But then after the popularity of Pit and Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Masahiro Sakurai and his team made Kid Icarus Uprising on the 3DS in 2012, which is one of my favorite 3DS games and very different from the previous games in the series. Usually the first 2/3 of every chapter are on rails, where Pit flies through the stage automatically and uses the stylus to aim while the left stick handles movement and dodging. The last third drops you into an arena for ground combat where the weapon fusion system opens up. You combine 2 weapons to make a new one, and every weapon type, bows, claws, cannons, arms, handle differently enough that there's a lot of room to find what combination suits how you play. There's also voice acting in this. Like, there's a lot of conversations between Pit, Palutena, Dark Pit, as well as others. Like, the story and dialogue is all just pretty funny here. Like, it doesn't take itself too seriously. I'd say my biggest problem with this this is just the controls are very wonky. Like, even when you're on the ground, it doesn't feel great, but especially on the on-rail sections, it just feels extremely clunky. And this game sold well. It's not like this game was a flop at all. It reviewed well, it sold well, but for some reason, for now the past 14 years, we've just gotten no new Kid Icarus game. Also, something I'm very disappointed about is that I never got the physical copy of this game. I forgot, I had some reward with Nintendo, and I was able to get this game for free on the eShop, but now the physical copy goes for like 60 bucks, and as someone who likes to actually own my games physically, I'm thinking about just buying it at this point. Number 29, Punch-Out! Another very famous old Nintendo series. Like, if you're watching this video, you've probably played at least one of these games before. You play as Little Mac and box some very quirky characters. Every opponent has their own pattern that you have to read, and they have their own timing windows you have to exploit. Some of these fighters are pretty easy to beat, like Glass Joe, but then there's ones like Bald Bull, Don Flamenco, and in the original Mike Tyson. And this game was actually really difficult for me, but I know some people have it down to a science, like, on how to beat these. There was a couple games that came out after the original. There was the arcade version, there was the SNES version, and most recently we got Punch-Out! On the Wii. It was basically like a reimagining of the original, but of course it was on the Wii, so it had motion controls, so you could use 2 Wii remotes and also the balance board if you want, and it makes it a lot more immersive. This was a really fun game, and this is something that would feel perfect on Switch, just like using 2 Joy-Cons, and it's really a shame that we've never gotten a new one, because this is kind of in like the same boat as Kid Icarus, where this game sold well. People love Little Mac because he was in Super Smash Brothers, yet it's been a decade and a half since a new game. Like, Mike Tyson has been in more Hangover movies than Punch-Out! Games that have been released since 2010. Number 28, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. So there are actually enough games here for it to be considered its own thing, and these are all dungeon crawlers with randomized floors, turn-based movement where every time you take a step, the enemies take a step, and you actually play as Pokemon rather than a trainer catching them. You carry items that you'll lose if you faint, and the floors get longer and more dangerous the deeper you go with no guarantee of a safe exit. Explorers of Sky on DS is probably the most popular one here, and the reason is the story is structured in a kind of way that kind of surprises you and ends on a sequence that hits harder than a dungeon crawler aimed at children had any right hitting. People still talk about this years later, and also it has to be said that the music in these games is fantastic. Like, I made a video going over the best and worst music in every Pokemon game, and I also included 3 spin-offs at the end, and a lot of people really wanted Pokemon Mystery Dungeon songs in that, and the reason is intentional because I'm actually saving that for another video, so be sure to subscribe when my video about the best and worst song in every Pokemon spin-off comes out. But anyway, these games have sold very well, they have great music, they're fun games, and they're still relevant today, so if you are into dungeon crawlers, I think it's very easy to get into this series. Number 27, Nintendo Wars. So this series is best known from Advance Wars, which is a series of turn-based strategy games where you move units across a grid, capture properties to fund more units, and try to either destroy the enemy CO or take their headquarters. It's made by Intelligent Systems, and there's of course a lot of similarities with Fire Emblem. However, unlike Fire Emblem, there's brighter colors here, the cartoon soldiers, the music is just a lot livelier, and it just plays a lot different than something like Fire Emblem. The CO powers charges you take damage and dish it out, and timing them is like the most strategy you have in this game. There's of course quite a few games in the series. There's Advance Wars 2 and Dual Strike on the DS, which are both very good. There's Battalion Wars, which took the same universe into real-time action on GameCube and Wii, and that one has you on the ground commanding troops rather than just directly moving on a map. So this series has a cult following, it's had a good amount of games, most of which have done very well. Most recently we got Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp on Switch, and I think it's actually more interesting to look at how this game got delayed. Like, there was a delay due to real world events, and a lot of people who were interested in this game kind of just lost interest because the game got delayed so much. The game was also priced pretty high, like Nintendo tried to sell this as a premium game instead of having it as more of a budget title since the series isn't that popular overall, but still I gotta respect it by putting it pretty high up in the list. Number 26, another Game Boy Advance RPG, Golden Sun. Golden Sun is one of those series where the fanbase has been waiting so long for a comeback that the wait is pretty much part of the franchise's identity. The original GBA games had a great reputation for things like the synergy system, elemental powers used in battle, puzzle solving, exploration, and dungeon design, and they all made the games feel more connected than a lot of RPGs where combat and overworld mechanics are just really separate. For a GBA series from 2001 and 2002, the scope was just a huge part of this. Like, these games looked impressive, they sounded great, they felt way more ambitious than you might expect from a handheld RPG at the time. And then there was Dark Dawn, the DS sequel that ended on a cliffhanger in 2010, and that was it. And while the original games came to Switch Online in 2024, there hasn't been a new game in over 15 years now. If you're into RPGs and haven't played this, I highly recommend either trying them out in NSO or watching some videos more in depth about them, because being honest, there's so much more you could say about Golden Sun than I could say in just this short segment. Number 25, WarioWare. So the concept of this is that you're playing a bunch of different micro games, which are just very short games that take a few seconds, and you play them in rapid sequence. Like, you literally read the instructions, you play them, and it just pretty much goes on and on until you fail. So there's been a lot of games in this series. That's why it's different than the main Wario series. Like, we've gotten a couple on Switch, we got one on Wii U, which is one of the most expensive games on there. We've gotten some on 3DS, DS. Pretty much every Nintendo console in the past 25 years has gotten a WarioWare game. However, the biggest drawback with this is that since it is just a series of micro games, there's only so much they could do with it. Like, yeah, they can make better games, they could have some more gimmicks, like the GBA had tilt sensors built into the cartridge. The DS game used the touchscreen and microphone. There's smooth moves on Wii, which, as you would expect, to use the Wii remote. But these games are are incredibly popular. They're all really good if you're just looking for a short kind of game to play like this. Also has some great music, and I just think it's funny how the Ashley song came back as a meme like last month, when that was one of my favorite songs in Smash Wii U back in the day. Just wanted to give a quick mention to that. Number 24, F-Zero. So you all know what F-Zero is because you know who Captain Falcon is, but do you actually know what this game is about? Besides being a racing game, you have a health bar, which is also your boost, and you start each race with a full energy meter, and you drain it by boosting and refill it by driving over recharge strips. But you also lose energy every time you hit a wall or get clipped by another racer. And if it hits 0, you're done, hence the name F-Zero. I don't know if that's actually true, but anyway. These games are really difficult. Like, this is no Mario Kart. You go over 1,500 kilometers per hour, which is over 930 miles per hour for those of us in the US. So think like 200cc in Mario Kart, but like on steroids. And these courses are also kind of crazy, like they loop vertically and thread through tubes, and it's kind of made this game a lot less accessible than something like Mario Kart. There's also story modes in some of the games. Like if you like fast racing games, you'll like F-Zero. And it's just kind of shocking to me how we haven't gotten a game in the series in over 20 years now, like not counting F-Zero 99, which we got on Switch Online, but it's not really like a full release or anything. Like these games are really fun, and we're still getting games like it. Like Fast Racing Neo from the last decade was one that clearly took a lot of inspiration. And I think if Nintendo brought back F-Zero, like they're bringing back Star Fox and like they've brought back some other old series, I think it's a game that could actually succeed on Switch because it's always had a niche audience, but people love Captain Falcon, and just the news around that would be enough to get headlines. Now, do I think Nintendo is actually going to make another game of the series? I don't know. But I have this high up because these games are all really good, especially the F-Zero game on GameCube, and it still has a cult following all these years later. Number 23, Tomodachi Life. So, of course, Tomodachi Life has been in the news a lot recently with Living the Dream, and I'm sure most of you knew the 3DS version, but this actually originated as a Japanese-only DS game. You just put characters on an island, you give them food, and they either like it or they don't, they have personalities, they become friends with other Miis, they date and get married, they have kids. Like, it's a life sim with Miis that very much feels like Nintendo. Like, it's not a super in-depth series, especially Living the Dream. Like, there's been complaints that it's been pretty shallow, but you got a ton of customization in it, and it's just fun to make Miis of people you know, of celebrities, of anyone you want, and just put them in these crazy situations. It's a childhood favorite of mine, and I do like Living the Dream, even though I do have a lot of issues with it. And Living the Dream is the reason it's so high, because this series is incredibly popular. It's had 2 great games in North America, and it's just simply some of the most fun I've had in some Nintendo games, especially the 3DS version. You can say it's recency bias, but honestly, I was looking for a reason to put Tomodachi Life on the list in the last video. In the last video I did where I had a 3-game requirement, but even without Living the Dream, it would have qualified, and it would have been a little lower without that. But again, it's one of my personal favorites. Number 22, Wario Land / Wario World. Another series that's actually been dormant for a surprisingly long time. One of my favorite games as a kid was Wario Land Shake It on the Wii, and that was the last Wario Land game. Like, that game was so good. It had a beautiful hand-drawn art style. It was one of the most creative games I played on the Wii. And while we've gotten Wario games with WarioWare since then, I think Wario Land is the much better series. So there's, of course, the Game Boy game, which was Super Mario Land 3, and then the Game Boy Advance games, and of course, Wario World on the GameCube, which I feel like was kind of forgotten about for a long time until it came back on NSO through GameCube. It's kind of hard to explain what the series is. It's not Mario, but it clearly takes a lot of inspiration from Mario, but it's its own thing. It tests its own ideas. And if you like 2D platformers like I do, these are games you should all play. And even if you like 3D platformers, Wario World is a very solid game. Number 21, Star Fox. So another series that is finally coming back, and we literally only found out about it last month. This series started on the SNES and then had its most popular game be Star Fox 64 on the Nintendo 64. And these are pretty much all rail shooters where you play as Fox McCloud, you have your crew around you, and you fight Andross and other beings who threaten the galaxy. These games are just fun. Like, I know rail shooters are not the most popular genre in 2026, and it's not my favorite genre of all time, but the series has always felt very different from most of the other things Nintendo has done. I believe it was one of the earliest Nintendo games to actually use real voice acting, like not just sound effects. The games have incredible music, and they all sort of follow the same formula. Like they have remade Star Fox 64 like 3 different times now. It's with Star Fox 3D, Star Fox Zero, and now Star Fox on Switch 2. And the only game that really changed the formula was Star Fox Adventures, which played more like a Zelda game, and you'll find very mixed reviews on that. Some people praise it, some people hate it, but I think it's at least worth giving a try if you are a Star Fox fan. So this was a series that was not one of Nintendo's most omnipresent, but it got entries at least every few years for a while. But then after Star Fox 3D, it was another few years until Star Fox Zero, and then from there we didn't get a new Star Fox game until this month, and I don't know when this video is coming out, but that's one of the reasons I moved Star Fox up just a little bit, just because the series is finally coming back. Number 20, EarthBound / Mother. The size of the devoted EarthBound fanbase is just completely out of proportion to the size of the library. It only has 3 games, and it's one of the most passionate communities in gaming, and almost no mainstream commercials success on any original release. The series, Mother 1, EarthBound Mother 3, is built around the idea that a turn-based RPG doesn't have to take place in a fantasy world, and putting Ness and his friends in a slightly wrong version of 1990s America, fighting hippies and department store security guards with a baseball bat. It's just a very strange game. It has a rolling HP counter where strong hit starts a countdown, you have to heal before it reaches 0. The soundtracks here are also praised, and famously Mother 3 on the GBA has never had an official Western release, despite over 20 years of people asking for it. Nintendo put it on Switch Line in Japan, and there's a fan translation from 2008, but I still find it odd how they've never just went through the effort to make an official translation. So why is this so high? Yes, the games are great, but it's only had 3 games, and the last one came out 20 years ago. And I think it's just because the series goes far beyond the actual games in it. Like, it has influenced some of the most popular games of the past couple generations. Undertale is very heavily influenced by the series, same as Omori, among plenty of others. We also have gotten many game theory episodes on this, which has just made it more popular. You can honestly put this lower depending on how you look at it, but I give a lot of respect to the series. Number 19, Wii series. So Wii Sports accomplished something very rare. It made the physical act of playing a video game accessible to people who had never played video games. Swinging the remote like a tennis racket has the same physical intuition as swinging a tennis racket. Bowling with a remote feels like you're bowling a bowling ball, except it's a lot lighter, unless you want to attach something super heavy to your Wii remote. Retirement homes bought Wiis for physical therapy. Little kids who have never played a video game could just pick this up and learn how to play. And it was, of course, a phenomenon that gave Nintendo that renaissance in the late 2000s. And even beyond Wii Sports, there's Wii Sports Resort, there's Wii Play, Wii Music, which we don't need to talk about. You could also count Switch Sports if you really want to here. And of course, Wii Party U, which is actually a really underrated game. These games are, for the most part, incredibly popular and kind of changed the gaming industry for a while. Number 18, Mario Sports. So I'm just grouping these together because there's a lot. There's Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, Mario Strikers, Mario Baseball, and a bunch of random one-off games like some of my favorites like Mario Sports Mix, the Mario and Sonic series, which I think actually has a game, so it could probably be its own thing, but I'm just going to group it into Mario Sports here. The reason it's so high is because there's so many games in this series if we group them together, and I think in recent years it's kind of fallen off a little bit, but go back to the games in the 2000s, even the early 2010s, and these were some of the most fun experiences I had in gaming. Mario Super Sluggers is a game I still go back to. Baseball is my favorite sport, and honestly, I'm still really sad that we haven't gotten a new Mario baseball game. Mario Sports Mix was a favorite, like I mentioned. There's been a lot of great Mario Tennis and Mario Golf games. Mario Strikers Charge on Wii is one of my favorite games. Now, none of these games are going to be Game of the Year level games or anything, but just taking into account all of the criteria, which is personal opinion, critical reception, omnipresence, things like that. That's why I have Mario Sports this high. Number 17, Yoshi's Island. So Yoshi's Island on SNES is one of the greatest platformers ever made. I first played it on the DS, and it's a personal favorite of mine. The movement is built around Yoshi's flutter jump because you can extend a jump midair for just long enough to reach a platform that you would have trouble reaching without it. You also eat enemies to make eggs, throw eggs, and then hit targets and collect items. You also have to carry baby Mario on your back, and then he just starts crying when he's floating away in the bubble. I really love the hand-drawn crayon aesthetic. The difficulty curve in this game is actually pretty solid, but the franchise since has spent 30 years trying to replicate that with just much easier difficulties, but that isn't always a bad thing. Yoshi's Island, yes, is great. It basically feels like a true successor to Yoshi's Island on SNES. There's Yoshi's Story on the N64, which is a fan favorite. Yoshi's Woolly World, which has one of my favorite art styles in a game ever. And just last week, we literally just got Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, which I've heard is very easy and is very accessible, but I've heard it's a good game, so I'm not going to be factoring that into this. But Yoshi as a series is something I had a lot of trouble ranking because I feel like outside of a couple games, this is not Nintendo's best series, but they're typically very high quality games, and you could always bet on them for coming around once a generation. Number 16, Luigi's Mansion. This whole series is pretty much built around one tool, which is the Poltergust. It's a vacuum on Luigi's back that he uses to catch ghosts. The loop is always the same in these 3 games. You stun a ghost with a flashlight, you latch onto it with a vacuum, you hold onto it while it fights back, and you drain its HP before it breaks free. So the struggle mechanic means every ghost capture is like a small game of tug of war, and the bigger the ghost, the longer it takes. So there's 3 games here, and I'd argue that Luigi's Mansion 3 is the best, but you could also argue the first. You know, you can even say the second is your favorite if it really is, even though it is definitely the most divisive in the series. Luigi's Mansion, of course, started as a GameCube launch title, and say what you will about the game, but its atmosphere is different than pretty much anything else in the Mario series. Like, this game actually feels creepy, the art style is creepier, and you just play in this one mansion as you just fight different ghosts and progress through it. Luigi's Mansion Dark Mode made a more mission structure, and then Luigi's Mansion 3 brought you into a hotel, and I love this game. True, it doesn't have the same atmosphere as the original, but I just always loved how creative they were with every floor and how good the mechanics feel here. It's a personal favorite of mine, a personal favorite of many others, and that's why it's going to go this high. Number 15, Mario Party. Another series you could probably have lower because, again, none of these games are going to be Game of the Year contenders, but this is a very special series to me, and there's so many games here, with I'd say most of them being really good games outside of that dark era in the 2010s. There's really not too much to say here because you all know what Mario Party is. Everyone has their own favorite. I'd say out of the first 8 or so, any of those could be anyone's favorite. You could even have Jamboree is your favorite because that's a really great game. These games are just simply fun. There's a lot of great mini games you play on boards, and it's a staple to play with friends for a reason. Number 14, Xenoblade Chronicles. So it's of course a real-time JRPG where you move freely around the battlefield while your character auto-attacks, and the actual decisions come from arts, which are special moves on cooldowns that you slot onto a hotbar and trigger manually. So it's kind of in like spreadsheet territory where there's just so much going on, and that's not everyone's thing, and it hasn't always been my thing. I really like Xenoblade Chronicles XO, and I mentioned this in like every video I've talked about it, but these games just have big open worlds with a ton to do, typically very interesting stories, and you could sink a ton of time into these games. And that's kind of my biggest issue with this series, is that the game just wants you to play so much before it actually starts to pick up. And when you're an adult, it's just kind of hard to find time to put like 10, 15 hours, maybe even longer into a game before it really starts to pick up, and then still have another 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours left before you even finish it. But for the people who like this series, they've really shown out, because this is quietly one of Nintendo's more popular series now, and all 4 games have been critically acclaimed. It's also interesting that Xenoblade actually almost didn't come to North America. Like, Nintendo didn't plan to release this year, but there was just a heavy push for it, and I'm sure Nintendo's very happy about that decision. For me, the biggest thing that kind of just throws me off about the newer games is the art style, and that's just me just nitpicking here. So being honest, it's not one of my favorite series, but it's hard for me to rank it any lower than this, just because if I try to look at it objectively with how great these games are in terms of reception, how it's very relevant, how they do incredibly well, like, I gotta give a lot of respect to the series. Number 13, Splatoon. Splatoon is one of the best new IPs Nintendo has created in the last 20 years. When it came out in 2015, there was nothing quite like it. Third-person shooter where the goal is to cover the map in your color rather than eliminate opponents. Like, it changes everything. You can be a better shooter by understanding turf coverage rather than aiming, and since you can swim through your own ink at high speed, the way you move around the map is the way you fight and the way you control the game. There's also, of course, a big interactive element here. Because this is a multiplayer first game, you can play with friends and try to coordinate how to play. There are single-player campaigns, and we're actually getting a single-player only game in Splatoon Raiders very soon. But this series is just pure fun. Like, it took an oversaturated niche, which is the shooter genre, and then completely changed it, and just added so much charm with the Inkling civilization, with the Octolings, with the customization. And there's a reason that the series was able to blow up on the Wii U. Like, that's not easy to do, to have a game start on the Wii U and then have it be one of their most popular series a decade later. Number 12, Fire Emblem. One of the more interesting series Nintendo's made, not necessarily because of the game design, although that is very interesting, but because how the series didn't even come to the West until the 2000s. There were Fire Emblem characters in Smash before there was a Fire Emblem game in North America, and I just always find that funny. So while we see this series as a juggernaut now from Nintendo, it wasn't always that way. Fire Emblem Awakening, which came out in 2012, was potentially going to be the last game in the series, but it blew up in popularity, and now we've gotten quite a few Fire Emblem games since. And even though Fire Emblem games haven't always been my thing, Awakening is one of my favorite 3DS games, and these games for the most part are just very good strategy RPGs. And again, like with Xenoblade, the art style kind of throws me off, but that's a personal thing. Hard to rank Fire Emblem any lower. Number 11, Pikmin. So I'm a big Pikmin fan. I even made a documentary on it last year if you want to check that out. But this is a real-time strategy game where you control different variations of the Pikmin. Now all the games have different stories, but it typically revolves around you finding different things, whether it's fruit or a treasure with the Pikmin, and then returning before night. And I've always loved the world design. Like, if you actually look at the stuff that you find, you're basically in someone's backyard. There's also hilarious brand placements, like there's literally just Duracell batteries in one of the games. And to bring these back, you have to have Pikmin carry them. But something I've always loved is just the different roles the Pikmin play. If you need Pikmin to go through fire, use the red Pikmin. If you need Pikmin to conduct electricity, use the yellow Pikmin. If you need Pikmin to swim, use the blue Pikmin. And that affects how you manage the Pikmin that you have. It's also satisfying just finding new items and mapping out more of the world. There's been 4 main series games and then a 3DS game we don't need to mention. And there's been a lot of gaps between these games. Like, after Pikmin 2 came out, it took until Pikmin 3 in 2013 until we got Pikmin 4 years later on the Switch. All of these games are incredible, and some people consider this to be a perfect series. I think it also speaks volumes that if you ask a Pikmin fan what their favorite game is, you'll get completely different answers. Some people prefer the original, some prefer 2, some prefer 3, and some are going to prefer 4. And I think that just shows how great the series has been. Number 10, Donkey Kong. So this is, of course, where Nintendo's North American business really started. And just to be clear, I'm talking about the entire Donkey Kong series, including Donkey Kong Country. So there was the arcade games, which is how most people know Donkey Kong, but then the Donkey Kong Country games on the SNES are considered some of the greatest platformers of all time, and I have to agree. I also have to agree that the games have some of the best soundtracks ever. But anyway, then we got Donkey Kong 64 and the N64, which literally just was added to NSO yesterday as I'm recording this. Then we got a bunch of random spin-offs in the 2000s, like whatever this is. And finally on the Wii, we got Donkey Kong Country Returns, which was like a modern take on the original Donkey Kong Country games. Then we got Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, which is one of my favorite 2D platformers of all time. And most recently, Donkey Kong Bonanza in 2025, which I believe to be the best original Switch 2 game as of now. Just some of the most fun I've ever had with a video game. And if we just look at all the platformers, literally every single Donkey Kong platformer is a masterpiece. You just can't find a bad one here. Now, spin-offs is a different story. They've been kind of hit or miss. But still, looking at the importing games in this series, they're all just incredible. Number 9, Mario RPGs. So I'm cheating a little bit here by grouping them in because we have the Mario and Luigi series, and then we have the Paper Mario series, then we have Super Mario RPG and Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. So you could argue that these should be either grouped in with Mario or have their own distinct spots. But at least for Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario, they would be around the same spot this high anyway. For anyone who has watched my channel, you know I am a huge Mario RPG fan. Like legitimately, a lot of my favorite games of all time come from these series. And the only thing keeping this from being higher is just my other criteria. Also, I haven't really been a big fan of a lot of the recent games, which has kind of brought it down. But where to even start about explaining this? Paper Mario and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door are two incredible RPGs. The first 3 Mario and Luigi games are kind of like a mix of Super Mario RPG and then just its own thing. And Super Paper Mario is legitimately a top 3 favorite game all time for me. The issue is that I don't think we've had a truly great original Mario RPG. I think the past 2 Mario and Luigi games haven't been great, and that just has brought it down a little bit. But for this series peak, it's absolutely near the top for me. Number 8, Animal Crossing. So this is very different from most other Nintendo series because there's no goal here. All it is just living your life while some animals are crossing around you. There's a real-time clock, which means the seasons change with the calendar, shops close at night. If you miss a week, then your town grows weeds and your villagers will say things about it. You even have a mortgage here, so it's realistic. This isn't a super in-depth life sim or anything, kind of like Tomodachi life. You just talk to villagers, you fish, you can find fossils, you pay off your house, decorate your house, but it's just a very relaxing game. And New Leaf on 3DS is still my personal favorite. Just being the mayor, the town development options, all the different locations, it's the peak of the series for me. Now there's New Horizons, which I actually really do like, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it at first, but it's just always been kind of an escape game. Like you play these games for a while without getting bored as long as there's enough content. And while the series has always been popular, New Horizons took it to a whole new level, becoming one of the greatest selling Switch games and introducing so many people to this great series. No matter what version you play though, I think you're in for a great time, and this is easily a top tier Nintendo series. Number 7, Metroid. This, of course, pioneered the Metroidvania genre, which is one of my personal favorites, along with Castlevania. It's inspired some great games like Hollow Knight, Dead Cells, and so many more. If you're still watching, you know what Metroid is, you know what Metroidvanias are, so I'm not going to bore you going in detail to every single game. But Super Metroid and Metroid Prime are considered 2 of the greatest games of all time, and they're very high for me. And then there's others like Dread, which is the return of a brand new 2D Metroid game. And honestly, it's very close with Super for me. Most of the games in this series are great. Like, this series ceiling is some all-time great video games, but its floor has been pretty low, especially with something like Metroid Prime Federation Force. And Metroid Prime 4, I don't actually hate, but a lot of people do. The issue with Metroid is that it just has never been one of Nintendo's biggest series. It's been around forever. It's had plenty of games be successes, but it's never been close to that upper tier of Nintendo series. Still though, this is a personal favorite of mine, and I have to have it high up on this list. Number 6, Kirby. This was another one, kind of like with Yoshi, where I wasn't exactly sure where to rank it, because I don't think the best Kirby games are better than the best Metroid games or the best Mario RPGs, but it's just so consistent. Like, there really is no bad mainline Kirby game that I can think of off the top of my head. Everyone seems to have a different favorite. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which is a 3D game and still pretty new, is widely considered to be the greatest, but these games are just fun platformers. It's kind of in that same category as Yoshi with me, where they're not going to be super difficult platformers, but you have a lot of fun characters, fun art styles, great music, but there's so many more Kirby games, and I think the Kirby games are better than the Yoshi games. Then there's also quite a few spin-offs, like most recently Kirby Air Riders, which was the long-awaited sequel to Kirby Air Ride on the GameCube, and I don't really know what else to say about the series. I honestly could have it a little lower depending on how you want to look at it, but I think it's hard to ignore the impact that Kirby has had. Number 5, Mario Kart. This is one of the most well-known series in gaming, and it's hard to find a single gamer who hasn't at least played one of these games. They're all fun games that can be played by pretty much anyone. All you really need to know is how to use an item, because the only other necessary controls are just pressing A and the analog stick or D-pad, whatever it is for that game. The music is incredible, and I went over these in other videos. The track variety is great, and like with Kirby, I don't think there's a single bad Mario Kart game. I don't think some of them are the best. I don't think Super Mario Kart is an all-time great game or anything, but there's a reason Nintendo can charge $80 for Mario Kart World, and it will still be the best-selling Switch 2 game. It's because everyone plays Mario Kart. If you are a Nintendo fan, you play Mario Kart. If you are a casual Nintendo fan, you play Mario Kart. And that's really all I have to say about this one. At number 4, Pokémon. So this is another one that you all know what it is, and I don't want to waste your time by just going in depth to what the series is, but I want to explain more about why I have it at 4. So culturally, Pokemon is a phenomenon. To my knowledge, it is the largest media franchise in the entire world. That's because the video games, the trading cards, the movies, the merchandise, the anime, everything. And for a while, Pokemon games were on top of the world. Like the Game Boy games, the Game Boy Advance games, even the DS games and early 3DS games were widely considered to be great games. And then spin-offs, like don't even get me started on how many spin-offs there are besides Mystery Dungeon. So in terms of peak, in terms of popularity, in terms of impact, in terms of consistency, Pokemon checks all the boxes. But the reason I have it lower is just that this series has really fallen off in quality over the past decade, especially in the Switch era. You'll have people say they like Legends EA, that they like Legends Arceus, that they like Sword and Shield, but it just seems like there's just a huge dip in quality. And since Game Freak knows that all these games will sell well no matter what, they haven't really needed to make many changes. So who knows what's going to happen with Pokemon Winds and Waves. But for now, it's just hard for me to rank Pokemon above the top 3. And then number 3, Super Smash Bros. So Super Smash Bros. Really only has 5 games. Technically 6, and it's still this high up because this is one of the most timeless Nintendo series and has never missed. Maybe one time. So Melee came out over 20 years ago and is still played competitively today. And Smash Ultimate is widely considered to be the greatest fighting game of all time and the best-selling fighting game of all time by like 20 million copies. While there's plenty of competitive players, especially for Melee, it's always been a series everyone can enjoy. Something like Street Fighter or Tekken is just a lot more niche and doesn't have the same appeal. But ask someone to play Smash and you'll see everyone get excited about their main or rage quit when they SD. The games also have some incredible replay value because you could always get better, and that's the core of a good PvP game. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert who can describe all the mechanics in great technical detail, but the amount of work Sakurai puts into each of these games is truly astounding. And in Ultimate's case, it's even more impressive considering there's like 90 fighters. You could really have Wii Fit Trainer fight Minecraft Steve in an official video game. Every Smash game is an event when it comes out, and it makes up for only being a few games with its quality, popularity, influence on the entire gaming industry, and also how much I love this series as a former kind of competitive player that won some tournaments. And at number 2, The Legend of Zelda. So this is my second favorite Nintendo series personally, and I think a lot of people will agree that it is the second best Nintendo series in general. However, if we're ranking this list purely on average quality across the full catalog, Zelda might even be first. Almost every mainline entry is at least good, if not exceptional, and that consistency over 40 years across completely different hardware is almost unmatched. The original in 1986 pioneered open world exploration on home consoles, then A Link to the Past defined it, and since then we've gotten the 3D games, especially Ocarina of Time, which is considered to be the greatest video game of all time by many people. As I get deeper into this video, it's kind of been harder for me to think of ways to describe these and why they're ranked so high, because if you're watching this and you're so far into this video, you know about all these series. You don't need me to repeat what makes them good or what they are. But The Legend of Zelda is something truly unique in gaming, and while there's been plenty of other games that have taken inspiration, nothing has quite replicated it, and nothing ever will. This is, in my opinion, the peak of just the action-adventure genre. And at number 1, it's of course Mario. So not even taking into account the sports games or the party games or Mario Kart or Mario vs. Donkey Kong or Dr. Mario or any of the other series that I went over separately here, Mario is the face of video games, not even just Nintendo. He's had more games than probably any other franchise in gaming history, and I'm taking all of that into account. Like popularity, try the most popular character in video games. Impact, Mario practically saved the gaming industry, and people who've never played a video game know who Mario is. And quality, Mario has way more hits than flops. And personal bias, for anyone who's watched any of my videos, I think you already know about that. Most of my favorite games of all time are Mario games, even if we don't talk about the sub-series. Super Mario Bros. 3, World, 64, the Galaxy games, Odyssey. I don't think there's a bad mainline Mario game, and I've said this for like 4 different series, but I think it's true here. I don't think this needs much of an explanation as to why it's number 1. And that is the ranking of every Nintendo franchise that at least meets my criteria. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and comment your list, and also consider joining my Discord. I also just want to say that there's no right way to rank these. It's incredibly difficult to find a proper way to rank this, so I tried my best to have a mix of a few different factors to make it a little more interesting. This is by no means an objective list. Your list isn't right, my list isn't right. There's no one right list, so I do just ask that you keep that in mind. And if you do disagree and want to respectfully let me know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.